This is your fault. How do I even follow that? I think I outdid myself. I'm going to try. Flames tore through the Sodder family home on Christmas Eve, 1945. Smoke choked the hallways, glass shattered, and George and Jenny Sodder scrambled to get their 10 children to safety. Some made it out alive. 5 didn't. But here's the strange thing. When the fire was out, when the embers cooled, and the ashes were sifted, there were no bodies, no trace, no remains, nothing at all. And that's how one of America's most haunting mysteries began, a case that blurs the line between tragedy, conspiracy, and legend. George and Jenny Sodder had built a life that on the surface embodied the American dream. George had immigrated from Sardinia in his youth, arriving in the United States with little more than a stubborn work ethic and a will to make something of himself. He found work on the railroads, later moved into the trucking industry, and eventually established a successful coal hauling business in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Jenny, also of Italian descent, was fiercely protective of her home and family. Together, they raised 10 children in a modest 2-story home just outside of town, a house that always felt loud, full, and alive. They were known as a stable, generous family. George was a provider, Jenny the disciplinarian with a soft heart. Their children, John, Joseph, Marion, George, Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jenny, Betty, and little Sylvia, filled the house with energy and noise while spanning a wide range of ages, but sharing a tight sibling bond. The older kids helped raise the younger ones, and the house operated like a small, loving unit. There were nightly chores, home-cooked meals, the sound of radios playing wartime news, and the crackle of the fireplace through the Appalachian winter. But beneath the surface, the Sodders weren't without tension, especially when it came to politics. George was outspoken in his hatred of Mussolini. He criticized the fascist regime loudly and often, even within the Italian immigrant community, which held divided loyalties. While some respected his views, others took offense. In the months leading up to the fire, George's politics caused rifts, some subtle, others explicit. One insurance salesman, who'd been turned away at the door, reportedly told George, quote, "Your house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." It was the kind of thing that might be dismissed as drunken bravado until it wasn't. The Sodders didn't know it then, but they were living on the edge of something that would turn their family into one of America's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. One where love, grief, and suspicion would collide for decades to come. I don't know about y'all, but I would have taken that as a straight up threat. I'm just saying. It was just after midnight on December 25th, 1945. Jenny was woken by the sound of the phone ringing, and when she answered, a strange woman's voice asked for someone Jenny didn't know. Behind the voice, she could hear laughter and clinking glasses, almost like a party. Jenny told her she had the wrong number and hung up. Going back to bed, she noticed the lights were still on and the curtains open, which was unusual for the children, who normally shut the house down before bed. She closed everything and returned to sleep. But not long after, Jenny was jolted awake again. This time, it was the sound of something hitting the roof, a heavy thump, then a rolling noise. Moments later, she smelled smoke. The Sodder home was in flames. George and Jenny rushed to get the children. 5 of them, Marion, Sylvia, Joshua, John, and George Jr., escaped, but 5 others, Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jenny, and Betty, all between the ages of 5 and 14, were trapped upstairs. George smashed a window trying to get back inside, slicing his arm pretty bad. He sprinted to grab his ladder, but it had vanished from its usual spot. He tried starting his coal truck to climb to the window, but both refused to start, even though they had worked fine earlier that day. Jenny ran to call the fire department, but the phone line was dead. A neighbor had to run to town to alert the fire chief. By the time the fire crew arrived hours later, the Sodder home was nothing but smoldering ruins. This all sounds coordinated, like somebody came through, cut the line, pulled something out of the truck and moved his ladder. It all sounds coordinated to me. Just off of that little bit, it all sounds coordinated. There's no way it can't be, right? The fire only lasted about 45 minutes. By the time the fire department arrived, delayed due to a confusing phone relay system and lack of available drivers, the house was already reduced to glowing embers. The Sodders, battered and in shock, waited for the recovery process to begin. But what followed wasn't closure, it was silence. No remains were found, not even a tooth, no skull fragments, no bones, no scorched cloth or metal buttons from the children's pajamas. The fire hadn't reached high enough temperatures to destroy everything. In fact, multiple experts told the family that even under much more extreme heat, bone fragments almost always survive. One local cremation specialist said flatly, even at 2,000 degrees, bones remain. They don't just vanish. Jenny, unable to sleep and unwilling to accept the explanation, conducted her own experiments. She burned bones from animal carcasses in her wood stove to see what would happen. In every test, some trace remained. She wrote letters to crematoriums and forensic experts, and every response backed up what she already believed. The children's remains should have been found. The idea that 5 young bodies could be completely incinerated in less than an hour in a house fire, not a furnace, didn't just strain logic, it shattered it. Adding to the confusion, the fire chief F.J. Morris claimed to have discovered a few pieces of bone in the ashes. But these were never photographed, documented, or turned over for examination. He later admitted to placing a heart-shaped object in a dynamite box and burying it at the scene, hoping to offer the Sodders closure. When the object was dug up and tested, it was revealed to be a piece of cow liver, not human remains. By then, George had bulldozed over the remains of the house, not out of carelessness, but out of despair. He couldn't stand the sight of it anymore. But that decision meant the site was disturbed before a proper forensic investigation could ever take place. Not that one seemed likely. Local authorities had already declared the case closed. accidental fire move on. But George and Jenny couldn't move on. They weren't just mourning the loss of their children, they were mourning the loss of an explanation. The more the Sodders looked into the fire, the more they became convinced that something else had happened that night. Something intentional. The first clue was the ladder. George always kept it propped against the side of the house for emergencies. But on the night of the fire, it was missing. Days later, it was found thrown down a steep embankment over 75 feet from the house, as if someone had deliberately removed it. Then there was the matter of the phone line. Initially assumed to have burned, it was later confirmed to have been cut. A repairman told the Sodders the line had been sliced, not destroyed by fire. And it had been done deliberately, not far from the house. This wasn't just damage from the blaze. Someone had taken steps to disable communication that night. Their trucks, both of which had worked flawlessly the day before, suddenly refused to start when George tried to use them as makeshift ladders to reach the upstairs window. Later, a mechanic examined the vehicles and found no clear reason for failure. Combined with the missing ladder and the cut phone line, it began to look like a coordinated act of sabotage. And then came the sightings. Multiple witnesses came forward in the weeks following the fire. One woman claimed to have seen the Sodder children peering out the back of a passing car as the house burned. Another, who ran a rest stop between Fayetteville and Charleston, said she served breakfast to a group of children matching their descriptions, accompanied by 2 adults. In another town, a woman said she saw the children at a boarding house, looking nervous as if they were being watched. These weren't wild rumors whispered years later. They were documented in the weeks and months immediately following the fire. And while some were vague, others were specific enough to prompt George to travel across states chasing them down, always hoping one would lead to his missing children. In the aftermath of the fire, several competing theories began to take shape. At the heart of every version was the same unshakable truth. 5 children vanished without a trace. The only question was why, and who might be behind it. The first theory centered on George's politics. His anti-Mussolini stance had made him enemies in the Italian immigrant community. Some speculated the fire was revenge for his outspokenness. This theory gained traction because it wasn't just a vague political beef. George had received threats in the months leading up to the fire, including one man who told him his house, quote, would go up in smoke, and that his children would be destroyed for his anti-fascist opinions. Another theory pointed to the mafia. Some believed George had been targeted by organized crime for either refusing to pay protection money or interfering with illicit business interests. The kidnapping of the children, in this view, may have been an act of intimidation or punishment. Then there was the possibility of child trafficking. This theory gained attention after multiple sightings suggested the children were seen in the company of unfamiliar adults, far from Fayetteville. If someone wanted to snatch the children and sell them to the families unable to adopt through legal channels, or worse, the chaos of a house fire would have been the perfect cover. The woman who ran the rest stop swore she had seen the children being watched closely by adults who refused to let them speak. And of course, there's the uncomfortable theory that some combination of local negligence and bureaucratic indifference let a crime go unsolved. Fire investigators ruled the incident accidental far too quickly, and police were reluctant to reopen the case despite growing evidence that something wasn't right. Whether that was incompetence, corruption, or a cover-up remains unanswered to this day. After the fire, the Sodders didn't grieve like a typical bereaved family. They launched a campaign, one that would span decades and cost them everything. George and Jenny poured their grief into action, transforming their home into an investigative command center. Every room became a holding place for case files, letters, witness statements, and newspaper clippings. They studied maps of the country, tracking reported sightings of the children. Jenny wrote to anyone who would listen: senators, governors, FBI agents, journalists, even J. Edgar Hoover himself. And George, he drove. From West Virginia to Kentucky, from Florida to New York. If someone claimed to have seen a boy named Louise, George was in the car the next day. One tip claimed the children were being held in an orphanage in St. Louis. Another claimed they had been adopted by a childless couple in Florida. Every lead ended in heartbreak. By 1950, they decided to take their search public. The billboard was erected along Route 16, a massive sign featuring the faces of the 5 missing children and a direct appeal to the public. What was their fate? Kidnapped or murdered? It read beneath the photos and address, Box 179, Fayetteville, where tips could be sent. The billboard quickly became a local landmark and eventually a national symbol of relentless parental grief. The Sodders paid to maintain it for over 40 years, replacing the wood when it was rotted, repainting the faces when they faded. It was their protest sign, their public record, their prayer. It also drew attention, good and bad. Some praised their determination, others said they were delusional. But the billboard worked its way into the cultural landscape. Truckers, travelers, and tourists all knew it. It was impossible to ignore. And for George and Jenny, that was the point. If their children were alive, somewhere, anywhere, that sign was their lifeline. In 1968, nearly a quarter century after the fire, a strange envelope arrived at the Sodder home. It was postmarked Central City, Kentucky. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. A man in his 20s, standing against a nondescript backdrop. Eyes blank, expression unreadable. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, were the words Louise Sodder. I love you, brother Frankie. Little boys, A90132 or 5. The family froze. The resemblance to Louise, who would have been about that age, was uncanny. The cheekbones, the eyes, the dark hair. Jenny reportedly clutched the photo and whispered, "That's my boy." The rest of the family agreed. It could absolutely be him. What did the rest of the message mean? Who was Frankie? What were the numbers? Was it a code, a cry for help, or a hoax? The Sodders couldn't know, but they couldn't ignore it either. They hired a private investigator to go to Kentucky and track down the sender. He accepted the job. He left, and he never returned. No reports, no updates, no trace. He simply disappeared, adding another mystery to a case already drowning in them. The photo was framed and placed on the mantle. It stayed there until the end of Jenny's life, sitting beneath a black veil that covered the living room window. A veil she hung after the fire and never removed it. For Jenny, the photo was proof. For the rest of the world, it was another question mark. George Sodder died in 1969. Jenny passed away in 1989. Neither of them ever learned what happened to their children. But the mystery didn't die with them. Their surviving children and grandchildren have kept the story alive, not just as a case to be solved, but as a wound that never fully closed. Over time, the Sodder case passed from newsprint into folklore. It became one of those stories whispered at campfires and passed around the true crime forums and unsolved mystery shows. Here, even. The billboard is gone now, but the questions remain. How does a fire destroy 5 children so completely that not a single bone is found? How do so many strange clues, the ladder, the truck, and the cut phone line, all point in the same direction and yet lead nowhere? And why, all these years later, does the case still haunt us? Because at its core, the story of the Sodder children isn't just about what happened on one snowy Christmas Eve in 1945. It's about a family that refused to stop searching, a mystery that defied explanation, and the terrifying possibility that sometimes the truth burns away, but the questions never do. I've obviously something weird went on. If you're not finding bodies or bones or anything in the fire, phone lines cut, trucks are messed up, ladders gone, some dude threatened you and your family, I think there should have been an investigation on the dude that said it. Find out who he's got ties with. Kind of follow the money. He was probably paid to go and talk to him. I don't know though. And it's so far behind that, looking into it, you're not going to find anything anymore. It's so long ago, 1945. This was Cracked Relic, and as always, sources will be down in the description and coming up after this. And thank you for watching. Thank you to the subscriber for suggesting this. And my heart goes out to those missing children who were never found.